Hey, welcome to day 179. We are in Isaiah and 2 Kings. And so here we finally get to some interesting points in the history. And I need you to make a special note about this, because we're going to come back to this type of thing again. So I'm going to say a couple things as we're going through this. So Israel's crown. Who is Israel's crown? Chapter 28 of Isaiah, verses 5 and 6. 5 and 6. Then at last the Lord of heaven's armies will himself be Israel's glorious crown. He will be the pride and joy of the remnant of his people. He will give a longing for justice to their judges. He will give great courage to their warriors who stand at the gates. A million things in this, maybe 3. Okay, first of all, he himself will be Israel's glorious crown. So there won't be a king like David or Solomon or any of the other kings. It will be Christ who is the king, and the glorious crown is God. Okay, he will be the pride and joy of the remnant of his people. The remnant of his people. He will give a longing for justice. Now, here's the thing here. He is giving this. He's going to put it in our hearts to have a longing for justice. Not that people don't want justice, but the way things are going today, justice has been perverted, and the hearts and the minds have been perverted about what justice is. So he's going to make us understand good justice. He will give great courage. Again, he's going to give courage to their warriors. Now, here's the point. There's a need for warriors, okay, who stand at the gates. So when we're talking about stuff, when eventually Israel's back in the land and they're finally there, they won't necessarily totally be in this form yet. We're talking about probably, this is my opinion, in the 1,000-year reign of Christ, and Christ himself will be here, and David will be the prince, and the 1,000-year reign of Christ is going on. There's still people being born and turning their backs on Christ, even though he is here, just like when he was here the first time. So there will be a need for great warriors that stand at the gates, and there will be, obviously, a need for justice, all right, to be put in the hearts. Now, 28 verse 16. I love this part. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Look, I am placing a foundation stone in Jerusalem, a firm and tested stone. A firm and tested stone. That will be Christ. What a great and awesome thing that is. It is a precious cornerstone that is safe to build on. Whoever believes need never be shaken. That is Christ. 100%. All right. Now, and I want to point out, this is the important part about this. 2 Kings 18, 9, and 10. During the 4th year of Hezekiah's reign, which was the 7th year of King Hoshea's reign in Israel, King Shalmaneser of Assyria attacked the city of Samaria and began a siege against it. 3 years later, during the 6th year of King Hezekiah's reign and the 9th year of King Hoshea's reign in Israel, this is why it's ridiculous to have all these different kings and stuff. But if you're following along in who's who, that makes sense to you. Samaria finally fell. At that time, the king of Assyria exiled the Israelites to Assyria and placed them in colonies along the banks of the Harbor River. Okay, here's the important part about this. They're exiled. This is about 722 BC if you look at your dates that are in your study Bibles. And if you were keeping a timeline, it's going to be very close to that depending on how you do your years. Okay, so we're just going to go with what the study Bible says, because these are scholars that came up with this. 722 BC, and I'm pointing that out because you need to put that in a note somewhere. You need to put that in there for timing purposes. An extremely important point about the time of when this happens. We'll be mentioning it many different times. All right, why? This is a key important part of this as well. Why are the exiled? Of course, you could probably say, well, because they're a bunch of sinners and idiots. So 18:12, chapter 18, verse 12. Oops, went too far. Excuse me. Verse 12 in chapter 18. For they refused to listen to the Lord. That's what it was. I mean, yes, they're sinning, but we are all sinners. Okay? Here's the difference. They refused to listen to the Lord, their God, and obey him. Instead, they violated his covenant. All the laws that Moses and the Lord's servant had commanded them to obey. I'm not saying it's okay to sin. I'm saying that we are set apart. And we keep saying this. And there's a chance for redemption. Even for these people, there's a chance for redemption. But the thing is, they have hardened their hearts. They're refusing to obey God or turn back to God. Okay? Now go to chapter 17 of 2 Kings and read verse 7. Excuse me. I got too many things marked here. This disaster came upon the people of Israel. People of Israel, okay? We're talking about the Israel people, not Judah. Of course, they're going to get the same thing. I'm just trying to point out, keep them straight, who's exiled when, because they're not both exiled at the same time. This disaster came upon the people of Israel because they worshipped other gods. They sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them safely out of Egypt and had rescued them from the power of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. We continue. It just goes on and on about why. Okay? Verse 13. Again and again, the Lord had sent, the Lord had sent his prophets. Remember, the point of the prophets is God doesn't do anything unless he sends the message through his prophets to his people. We learned that that's what he said. I will not do anything unless I tell you what I'm going to do through the prophets. Again and again, the Lord had sent his prophets and seers to warn both Israel and Judah. Turn from all your evil ways. Obey my commands and decrees, the entire law that I commanded your ancestors to obey, and that I gave you through my servants, the prophets. Verse 14, but the Israelites would not listen. Again, it's about listening and understanding what we see in Revelation over and over again. Listening and understanding. We are set apart. We're not refusing to listen. We are trying to learn. That's why we're doing this. Okay? They were as stubborn as their ancestors who had refused to believe in the Lord their God. They rejected his decrees and the covenant he had made with their ancestors, and they despised all his warnings. They worshipped worthless idols, so they became worthless themselves. They followed the example of the nations around them, disobeying the Lord's command not to imitate them. Look at what is happening in our country today. And you'll see that people are following practices from other nations, and they're totally turning their backs on what our country was founded on. All right, now verse 17, chapter 17, verse 17, and this should be a kicker for you. They even sacrificed their own sons and daughters in the fire. And today we are just murdering kids in the womb, even after they come out of the womb. They consulted, here's another point, they consulted fortune tellers. Put that in your list of witchcraft mediums and psychics. They consulted fortune tellers and practiced sorcery and sold themselves to evil, arousing the Lord's anger. They totally turned their backs on God. So that is extremely important that we understand what happened with Israel. Is he warned them way back in the beginning, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Make sure you're paying attention. Listen and understand what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to save you, because if you don't, I'm going to take you out of the land. And that is where we're finally at. So you have Genesis. Lord makes everything. 1,600 years later, he sends the flood because sin has run rampant. He saves Noah and his family. And from then, from that time up until now, he warned them and warned them and warned them, send the prophets. They're in their land and they're now exiled. So they're being taken out of their land. That is your day 179. We'll pick up again here tomorrow. See you tomorrow.